Want to catch more trout? Here's what you do. Stay tuned. Welcome back. I'm Mr. R and this is the Rondinelli Project. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to prepare live minnows to use for trout season. I'm not talking lake fishing from a boat. I'm not talking large stream fishing. I'm not talking fly fishing. I'm talking preparing minnows for small creek fishing. The statewide trout season in Pennsylvania opens Saturday, April 5th. Here's what you need to do if you want to catch more trout on small water. Okay, let's start off with some minnows, a minnow net. This is what you're going to use here, some Morton's Canning pickling salt. I have a plastic bag to put the minnows in once you're done, and I have a container to put the plastic bag in so you don't get salt all over the place. So that's a good place to start. Now, this is the salt I use, canning and pickling salt. You could use plain ionized salt, but I think the pickling salt works better over the long haul. First thing I do is I take my plastic bag and I put it inside this container. That keeps the salt from getting all over the place. Now what you want to do, once you get that container lined, is take your salt and pour a healthy amount in the bottom. They have a pop-up top here. I'm going to cut the top of this box off here in a little bit, but I pour some salt in just to get started. Now, once you've done that, pull up your minnows. I'm using fatheads. I got a couple dozen from the bait store. And take your net, scoop them into the salt. These are nice fresh minnows. They're just the perfect size for trout. It's just better to salt your own than to buy salted minnows, in my opinion. They're fresher, they last longer, and they really look good in the water. And that's what you want. You want a minnow that looks natural to the trout. There's lots of minnows in small streams, and it's a go-to bait when all the other things aren't working. And trout are used to seeing minnows, and they go after them like crazy. They go after them like gangbusters. Okay, I've put my minnows in the minnow bag, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add more salt, and you don't want to skimp on salt. As you can see, I cut the top off of that box. It just makes it a lot easier. So I'm going to pour in a hefty amount of salt. You want to cover them very well. You want to get them all covered. It's the salt over time that really sets them and preserves them. It'll take all the slime off of them. It will harden them up, and they'll last a lot longer that way. When you rig your minnow, of course, that salt will all come off in the water, and when you work that minnow against the current, it really looks good. Now, once you got your salt in there, you want to seal the bag because you don't want to get salt all over the place. It's kind of like, shake and bake. You're going to cover these minnows with salt, so you just kind of move them around. Do a good job of getting them all covered, and this kills the minnows quickly. Salt, of course, takes the moisture out, but it also acts as a preservative. And that's the whole point of this. Yeah, you can buy salted minnows, but they're expensive, and they're just not the quality of doing your own. And that's the whole purpose of this. It's not that hard. And if you go crappie fishing or you're lake fishing and you've got minnows that you don't use, bring them home and salt them. Minnows are hard to keep once you bring them home. They die. Don't let them die, just to save them for your trout fishing. Once you've worked that over really well, got the salt, this particular grouping here needs a little more salt. So I put it back in my container. This keeps getting salt all over everything. Pour some more salt in. Don't be afraid to pour some more salt in. And then shake them up again. And once you do that, once you get everything coated really well, the bag sealed, I take all the air out. Leave a little crack, get all the air out, and get them covered really well. It's very important that once you finish doing that, that you refrigerate your minnows, for a couple weeks. But I take the whole bag with me when I go trout fishing. I carry it with me, and when I need a minnow, I just grab it, take it out, and then I use the needle rig. I'm going to show you how to do that here in just a second on that needle rig. But there's my refrigerator. I keep it in the garage. It's just for my bait. And in they go. And that's where they'll spend the summer. And anytime I go trout fishing, I've got salted minnows. Now, using a needle to rig minnows. First thing we're going to do, I use a treble hook. I have a salmon egg hook. I have a split shot for weight. I have a slip bobber rig and a needle. And that's really important. So, to start off, I will feed on the end of your line coming off of your rod, and I use a fly rod to fish for trout. Put the salmon egg hook on first, and then you take a bobber stop and you slip it through the little wire loop and pull that back through, and that will feed the bobber stop on there. Pull it back through, the bobber stop's on. I don't use the bead for trout fishing. I want it to look as natural as possible. So take that bead off. The next thing I'm going to do, there you can see the bobber stop and the salmon egg hook. And that salmon egg hook is stopped by the bobber stop. That's important. Now, next step is to tie a loop in the end of your line. And the reason for that loop is so you can hook a needle on the end of that and pull that line through your minnow, through the mouth, all the way back through the body, and set it near the back of the minnow. Now, if they're short striking on you, you want to set that treble hook even back further by the tail, and that sometimes will get them if they're short striking. I tighten that loop up, put the needle in there, and I pull that loop nice and tight on that knot. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut that tag end off. You cut it about a 1/16 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch short there. And there's the end of your line. Now, you take your minnow and you take your needle, and this is important. I know this seems like it's really complicated, but after you do it a few times, it's pretty easy. But you run the needle all the way through the mouth and out through the back on the belly, and then take your loop and hook that on your needle. Pull that through the mouth and out the back. Now you have that loop exposed on the back. And the reason for that is you're going to put your treble hook on there. And this is kind of tedious, but you feed the loop through the eyelet and then go over all 3 hooks and then pull it back tight on itself. You'll catch on to that. The first couple times you do it, it might take you a little bit. But then I put that eyelet in where the needle can back through. I take one of the treble hooks and I feed it into the back. And then the bottom 2 hooks are exposed on the bottom, and the line's coming out through the mouth. Now, this is the important part. This is why I put the bobber stop and the salmon egg hook on. The bobber stop pulls the salmon egg hook away from the mouth, tightening up the minnow on the line. That's extremely important. I hook the salmon egg hook through both lips. You can also put them through the eyes sideways. It really doesn't matter. But the importance of this is it tightens the minnow up so that it doesn't curl. If that minnow curls back, if you don't do this, and a lot of people don't, the minnow will slide down over time and it'll start to spin. And when it spins, it does not look natural and the trout will go away from it. But if you use that salmon egg hook and the bobber stop, you can keep that nice and taut, and that's what it looks like, and that'll come through the water really, really in a natural way, and that's what you want. You can then put your split shot in front of the eyelet of the salmon egg hook if you need it to get it down in the water column. Sometimes a trout will hit it from the side and they'll get hooked on that salmon egg hook. So you got a hook in the front, you got a hook in the back. It's killer. I'm telling you, it's killer. Now, if the minnow gets destroyed from the trout, you just pull out a new minnow, get your needle, run it back through, put the hook on, and then rig yourself back up. It really doesn't take that long after you learn how to do this. I just do that right alongside the creek. Take your time. You don't have to rush. The trout's still in there. He's waiting. I know there's all different kinds of bait you can use to fish for trout. Spinners, salmon eggs, worms, grubs, maggots, and the list goes on and on. But in my opinion, through years and years of fishing for trout on small creeks, by far the best bait that produces more trout in your creel are freshly salted minnows, rigged the way I showed you in this video. Give it a try. See if it doesn't produce for you. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Good luck trout fishing in 2025. Drop me a comment or two. My question for this video is, what is your favorite bait to use for trout fishing, regardless of species? Drop me a note. I'm Mr. R, and this is the Rondinelli Project. Take care. I'll see you next time. But for now, we gone.